Just imagine that you have a cut on your body and there is a wound, really deep wound. We all know the body has the capacity to heal, but it takes time. Of course, we put a bandage on the wound and then somebody comes and touches it. And even though the wound has a bandage on, it starts hurting. And that's what happens with blaming other people. Those people, they actually really open our wounds again. That's why it hurts.
Welcome to Project Loving Myself, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of self-discovery, self-love, and healing. Welcome back to Project Loving Myself, the podcast that brings you back to yourself through real self-love. Sometimes loving yourself means finally looking at the wounds you've been carrying, the ones that shape how you react, how you love people, how you protect yourself, and even how you show up in your life. Because so many of the patterns we struggle with as adults, well, they didn't just begin in adulthood. They began much earlier, in childhood, in the moments we felt unseen, rejected, unsafe, or not enough. In the family roles that we learned to play, in the family dynamics that we grew up in, and sometimes even in generational patterns that were passed down to us before we even had the words to understand them. That's why inner child work is one of my favorite topics to talk about. But on this episode, we're going even deeper. Now, I've spent years healing my own inner child, and honestly, she still shows up, especially when something small suddenly feels much bigger than it should. And usually that's a sign that a younger part of me is asking for attention, maybe for love, for safety, or reassurance. So today I've invited back on Project Loving Myself someone who does such powerful work in this space. Monika Wyss is a family constellation trainer, clinical hypnotherapist, and founder of Heart Sanctuary Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Through family constellation, inner child healing, and trauma-informed practices, Monika helps people uncover the childhood wounds, family patterns, and unconscious stories that shape how they live, love, achieve, and even see themselves. I've asked her back on Project Loving Myself to talk about where these patterns come from, how they affect us, and how we begin to heal them with more compassion. Monika will also be holding live workshops this month, so we'll talk a little bit about those as well. Monika, I'm so happy to have you back on Project Loving Myself.
Thank you so much, Sanaya. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here again.
So we had this amazing conversation about inner child healing. And today I want to go a little bit deeper. So let's start with the wounds, Monika, that we carry from childhood. How do they show up in your practice, in your experience, in our adult life, especially in relationships, maybe in how we parent, or perhaps even how we react to things in our lives?
Oh, well, they show up in everyday life, literally in relationships. And, the wounds happened in relationships. They didn't just happen on its own when we are sitting on a balcony, drinking coffee or tea, enjoying life. They happened in relationships with others and mostly our parents in the childhood. And since they happened in relationships, they will show up in relationships. So very often we really get triggered when we are not being seen, not being heard, not being taken seriously. And this is when we feel that something is off. This is when we may start withdrawing from a conversation, withdrawing from a relationship. We may start hiding, or we may start attacking because we feel not safe. So it really shows up, in my opinion, in the relationships with our loved ones. Of course, it hurts the most.
Yes, that's the worst place for them to show up.
Place.
They really do.
Absolutely, with the partner and even with our children, because they show us what we are not aware of yet. So it's actually a gift when they show up in our adulthood.
So you call it a gift, Monika. Why is it a gift when these triggers, wounds, behaviors, sometimes you react in ways you wish you hadn't, and it feels like you're a little bit out of control. How is that a gift?
For me, it is a gift because I get to know myself better. Of course, there is a prerequisite that I become aware how I'm reacting or what it does to me, because reaction is one thing, but reaction is just on the top of the wound. So if I start inquiring what actually happened that I had this reaction, how do I feel? Where does that come from? That's exactly the gift. I may uncover those deep-seated wounds and then I start healing. So this is why it
And
is gift to myself. So I can just become more whole. Because for me, healing is literally returning to wholeness.
I love that healing is returning to wholeness. And I think so many people tend to run away from healing because it's like, you're opening the door to all these things that you may not be
Yeah,
prepared or comfortable
yeah,
facing or confronting, but it's there.
it's
It's
that.
like the mess beneath the surface. And if we don't clean it up, it stays there.
Mhm.
It stays there for a very long time, collecting more dust
Mm.
and creating, I think, more stress and drama in our life. So healing really is the only way,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Monica,
In my
to
opinion, yeah.
um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, to clean that up. But the thing is that for many people, they're not really aware that many of their behaviors or many of the ways they get triggered or
Mm.
react in their relationships goes all the way back to these experiences in childhood or perhaps even further back than that. What would you say to people who have no idea, who have no clue, and they're hearing this for the first time and they're like, "What? Is this really how it is?" So tell us a little bit more of how you would explain that.
That's a really good question because, there need to be at least a willingness in people to question things. Because if somebody just tells me, oh, I don't believe in it, that it comes, from the childhood or wherever, it is my boss, it is my boss's fault. So it's nothing about me. There is not much we can do. And I don't think it's,
Right.
and I don't even think it's our job to do anything. So it's really all about awareness. And I always say that in most cases, unfortunately, this is really very unfortunate. In most cases, people start looking for healing because they are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Simple as
Yeah.
that. They had so many negative experiences with other people, with themselves. They feel depressed, they feel anxious. They don't want to feel this way anymore. So this is when they start
Yeah.
searching. So even if they are not aware where it comes from, I would say if you are not content or happy with your life, just be open. Just be curious.
Yeah.
What could you do to become more happy? And people like you, Sanaya, and myself, this is the work that we do. So we are just bringing the
Absolutely.
awareness out to the world together with all the other million people everywhere on Instagram and Facebook. And I think, that's the only thing we can do. We can just share our own stories, our own healing journey, and many people will be just inspired by that and they will start looking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I honestly
Absolutely.
let go already on of the expectation that everybody has to heal, because no, they
Yeah.
don't. They don't. Yeah.
But you highlighted a couple of really important things, Monica, that I want to bring up. First of all, people tend to blame other people for the things that are going wrong, right? And in many cases, it feels
Yeah.
valid. Well, they did this to me. They said this to me. It's their fault. And I think that blame game is
Hmm.
where a lot of people stay trapped.
Yes.
Because as long as you have someone else to blame, you don't have to do anything about it, right? You don't have to change. You don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to heal because it's somebody else's
Yeah.
fault. So I think that is the first thing to become aware
Hmm.
of is when you are constantly blaming other people in your life, or you're in a situation where you consistently blame the same person, right? Could that be the opening
Hmm.
to recognize that there's something that needs healing within ourselves? That's the first thing I wanted to bring up
Mm.
about what you said, because I thought that was really
Hmm.
powerful is, we can't do anything if you're stuck in blame
Yeah.
and you want to blame the other
Yeah.
person, because at that point you don't think you need to heal. But perhaps that is the signal to you that healing is required. And the other very interesting thing you said is, it's all about awareness, right? It's all about asking questions and being curious and allowing yourself to see beyond what is appearing in your life. And Some of the things that I know you work with include family roles and dynamics and patterns and family constellation. So, could it be deeper than just the inner child? So, what are your thoughts? I know I'm throwing you, two big questions, Monica, but I think the first one is we both agree that when you're blaming someone, it's actually a signal that you could look at yourself and what needs healing because it's never about the other person. And can we go deeper into understanding where some of these wounds could be coming from?
Yeah. And just when you mentioned about blaming other people, this metaphor came to my mind. So I would love to share because those other people, they do something. And again, for me, it's like a blessing in disguise. What they do is just imagine that you have a cut on your body, on your hand, and there is a wound, really deep wound. And we all know the body has the capacity to heal, but it takes time. It usually doesn't heal in 1 second. So, of course, we put a bandage on the wound and we are carrying this wound with ourselves for a few days or few weeks. And then somebody comes and touches it. And even though the wound has a bandage on, it starts hurting. And that's what happens with blaming other people. So those people, what they do, sometimes consciously, but most of the times unconsciously, because they are reacting and acting from their own behavior, they actually really open our wounds again. That's why it hurts. So that's the
I love that.
opportunity to look at the wound, to really see where does that come from and, heal it. And other people are always a reflection. That's my belief. But other people are always the reflection of the first people who took care of us in the childhood, very often. So our relationship with our mother, with our father, often shows up later in relationships with other people. But, that's maybe for another podcast, but it's really true. So those relationships we have with friends, intimate relationship with partners, relationship with our bosses are very, very often like the reflection. Yeah, really like a mirror reflection of what's still open within our relationship with our parents. And that's the childhood wounds, like what you were saying. And there is something deeper. Very often, the patterns that we see in our lives, even if the pattern is repeating and we see it with every single partner we attract, with every single boss we attract, we are working on. Many of those patterns come from childhood, but that's only also on the surface. Yeah. They often come from the dynamics within our family system. And this is when we move into family constellation, when we move into the order of love, the laws of the universe that govern our families, the groups in general, the systems. And if those orders are imbalanced when they were disrupted in the past, then spill off, like our wounds spill off into our relationships, these imbalanced orders spill off into next generations and we may carry them. So very often it didn't really start with us. Yeah, it started somewhere, either with our parents, our grandparents, or even further back. And in a way, out of loyalty, we carry those patterns.
Quick pause. Do you ever feel like you keep ending up in the same place? Same situations, same feelings, same patterns, even though you're trying so hard to change. There's usually a reason for that. If this resonates with you, I'd love to help you make sense of it. Book a Make It Make Sense call with me, and together we'll connect the dots, uncover the pattern underneath it, and get clear on what needs to change. Because when you understand the pattern, you stop repeating it. The link is in the show notes. Now back to the episode. Okay, that was a lot of really, really juicy, interesting, topics you've opened up. So, first of all, I want to say, Monica, my father used to say to me all the time, he would say, why go into the past?
Yeah.
The past is over. The past is done. Why do you
Yeah.
keep bringing up the past? He would tell me. And I would get so frustrated because I'm like, everything is about the past. You can't talk about the present or even move into the future if you do not, in a way, excavate the past, dig into it and understand where things began. Otherwise, you're just repeating the same things over and over again without resolving where they came from,
Yeah.
And we still disagree on
Yeah.
this. Like my dad, he has this philosophy of like, forget the past, move on. And I have a philosophy of like, wait, where did this come from? Where did this start? I want to understand this. I need to know why. So we have very different perspectives.
Mhm.
But of course, my perspective led me to become, who I am today, which
Yeah.
is healing and coaching people and making this my life's work. But it really is what you're saying, that many of the behaviors, the patterns, the situations in our life are just repetition, are just repeated patterns from what happened in our family generations ago, or things that our grandparents struggled with that we feel we need to correct or fix or repeat because we are genetically connected, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. Can you give me an example, Monika? You said family dynamics and you used the word family constellation, family systems, right? So give me an example of something that could be disrupted, something that could be a problem in the past.
So before I answer your question, just a quote popped up in my mind that I would like to share. I do not remember who is the originator of the quote, but I remember that also Bert Hellinger, the father of constellations, used it. If you don't know your history, you are doomed to repeat it. So, that's a little bit about the story of your dad. And again, if
Yes.
people can live like that, wonderful. Sometimes I wish I would stop digging in the past and just turn around and move forward only. I really wish that. But I don't know. That's probably soul journey that is different, and that's okay.
That's why they say, right, Monika? They say ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
But is it really? Because you're just, yes, you're in ignorance of why and where it came from, but then you're miserable with whatever things are happening in your life anyways.
So I think that's exactly the distinction that we need to make. If you are ignorant and happy, I mean, truly happy, not in denial, but truly happy, no problem. Maybe, you are just, this is your life. Enjoy it fully.
This conversation is not for you.
Exactly. It's not for everyone. Let's be honest. But if you think, it's good to be ignorant, but you are miserable, like what you said, okay, something is off. Maybe it would be worth to just question it. I'm not even saying digging deep, but just question it. Is there anything that, blocking me from having more joy, happiness, contentment in my life? Okay, now going back to your question, the family dynamics. So it's something coming to my mind as well. It's an example of a client that I worked long time ago, 15 years ago in Malaysia. She wanted to have a child, second child. So there was absolutely no issue with getting pregnant with the first child. And the couple, they wanted a second child after 7 years. They have been trying for a very, very long time and nothing happened. So they were even thinking about IVF, but they still wanted natural. So we did a constellation for that.
And a constellation, Monika, let's set up, what is a constellation?
This is what we will be doing in Manila in a workshop. We are using people as representatives for family members or for certain abstract things, like, for example, money, etc., etc. We can come to it a bit later and I explain exactly how that happens. But basically, we were in a workshop and this was the client. She brought this topic. Monika, we want to have a second child. And it's not happening. And she was young. She was 30 plus. So, no medical reasons for not being able to get pregnant. And what we found out was that I think it was her great grandmother, died at childbirth. Now, guess with which child? With the second child. So she had one child, she had the second child, and she died. The child survived. No problem at all. And this memory of death at giving birth to the second child was still running in my client's unconscious, because that's what we are talking about, right? It's all unconscious.
Right.
Consciously, we may even know, we may remember stories that were told, but we may not really feel it. But the body remembers. That's what trauma is all about as well. And we carry not just our own trauma in the body, but we carry the memory of our ancestors. So this client of mine, there was this unconscious fear. If I'm pregnant with my second child and I give birth, I may die.
Wow.
That's the loyalty that we have to our family members. And it's not family members who we know. She didn't know this person. It was great-grandmother, was long time ago. And she knew about it. So it's nothing new, but it never occurred to her that there could be what we call in constellations an entanglement, a loyalty, a deep connection to the fate of the great-grandmother.
Just to clarify, Monika, she knew that her great grandmother had died in childbirth with the second child.
Yeah.
But she didn't actually know her great grandmother. She didn't really have a relationship
No.
with her. It's just like one of those family history
Yeah,
stories
exactly.
that we know, right? And in some cases, I know the client or the person whose work, family constellation is being done, they may be aware of the story or the history. And in many cases, they are completely unaware, and it just comes out, it unfolds in the healing process as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So in this case, she knew about the story, but hadn't made the connection
No.
that her own situation was being mirrored in the fear of repeating what had happened to her great grandmother who died in childbirth with the second child. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So you see awareness, right?
Awareness.
Really awareness was there suddenly. Oh, so there is a connection. So it's not just a story, a history of
Yeah.
my family system, of my mother lineage, but there is awareness. Okay, I have a connection with this great grandmother.
Yeah.
And the beauty is 1.5 months later, she was pregnant. Now,
Of course.
of course,
Of course,
but I
right?
don't,
For
you
us,
see,
it's like, of course.
I don't want to say it's because of the family constellation, but
Of course it is.
what can we say? And this is exactly what happens in this work. Yeah, whether it's in a child work, it's family constellation. The moment we become aware, the moment we can actually acknowledge what happened, and also detach in this situation, also detach from the past. That's a little bit what your father does, but he does it before looking at it. It's like, you know what, this is the
Right.
past, I'm moving on. And in some cases, that's enough. That's the past, I'm moving on. In some cases, not. And this is very important point that we look at in family constellations. Why certain events may have impact on us and certain events don't. So now it can be that the grief maybe of the father of the child, that he lost his wife, was never processed. There was probably guilt feelings too, right? Because if she wouldn't have been pregnant, then she wouldn't have died. So it's not just the fear of the client that I may die because my great grandmother died, but there is the whole trauma that was unprocessed. So what we do in Constellation, we need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge everything that belongs to that event and to that person as well. And only then the client can feel relieved, can say, you know what, that's not mine. It happened and it was tragic, of course, but this is not mine. And my fate, my destiny is different. Different times, different persons. So on one side, we have to acknowledge and kind of connect to the situation and to the person, and then only let go and detach and leave the past to the past.
And I think this is what's powerful, right, Monika? Because as we're talking, it's becoming more and more clear to me that so much of what happened to generations of our ancestors, our families, was not really seen, recognized, addressed. A lot of times we just ignored or avoided things that happened, and we still do it today. Many times we don't want to look back and reflect at those events and situations that hurt us. We just want to like forget about it. And I'll use my father's example. In his defense, I can understand why he
Yeah,
doesn't want to
of
look at the
course.
past, because his father died before he ever got to meet him in a very tragic way. And I have a husband whose father died when he was 4 years old. And I know till today, we've been married more than 15 years, the trauma of his father's death still shows up in many situations.
Yeah.
I've done so many healings with my husband, and I know it still is a big traumatic event in his life. So for my father, who never got to meet his own father, of course he doesn't want to look at the past. He doesn't have the capacity to deal with the grief and the emotions that have not been processed or addressed or seen. But that, in fact, is the healing, is being able to go back and see it, just witness it, just, accept that this happened. And I think many of us walk around not accepting the tragic situations in our life, or the tragedies, the wounds, the pain. We don't want to see it. We don't want to accept it. And we think if we don't acknowledge it, it's not there. But the problem is it is, right? It really
Unfortunately, it
is
is.
there, and it's hiding. It's hiding underneath all those layers. And when it goes unprocessed, unhealed, Monica, what happens? Now, in your client situation, she couldn't conceive her second child. But what are some other examples of challenges we might have because of unhealed, unprocessed, tragic events or situations that we're carrying? Maybe genetically or in our own lives. What are some examples?
So we can see it really in the daily life, in relationships with our partners. Or there is a lot of people who have difficulty to find that one person, that soulmate, how they call it. And they are attracting again and again the same type of partners who either leave them or they are leaving. It's like the partnership doesn't come to fruition. It can be really a repeating pattern from the past as well, when somebody lost a husband or a wife and the grief was not processed. So that's one possibility. Another possibility shows up in financial field of ours.
Yes,
It's success.
right?
It's also connected. Yeah. Even, attracting the same kind of bosses who don't see us, who don't value us, can be a repetition from the past and not our own past. Can be our father, our grandfather, or grandmother. So there is a lot of possibilities. I had clients who also, another client who had difficulty to conceive a baby. There were a lot of abortions in the system. So it's almost like really wanting to have a baby and not being able to conceive is almost like this paying the price for all the abortion, for all the aborted children
That
that
was
didn't make it.
in the past.
This was in the past
Yeah.
and not even the client's abortion. So it can show up in so many ways. And of course, we see illnesses when we carry trauma in the body. And that's very well known even in psychology nowadays, that, if we don't look at it, if we ignore it, it shows in the physical symptoms after a while, because the body keeps the score. Right? So we carry it with us, whether we are aware of it or not. It just stays there.
I'll add, because you brought up illness. I remember one of the family constellations that I attended many, many, many years ago. Maybe this was 12 years ago. And there was a woman with breast cancer. And it turns out that her breast cancer was connected back to ancestral trauma and grief. And she went through the constellation for the breast cancer, and she went into remission right after that.
Wow.
So I remember, that there have been just incredible healings that I have seen because of family constellation work.
Yes.
Now, there are two things I want to bring up, Monika, that I've seen in some of the work, we've done in workshops where I attended your first round of workshops here in Manila where you did family constellation. And adoption and betrayal. These are the two things that I know came up a lot. When we talk about adoption in a lot of Asian families, because, in Asian families, they tend to have a lot of kids. And there are sometimes relatives who are childless, and then they give, a family that has many kids might give one of their children to the childless couple. So within the family, how would you call it? They would give or share their children, right? And there are sometimes stories of adoption in the family as well. How does that affect or show up in current dynamics for people? Like, I know you've done a lot of work with these kind of adoption stories. Can you give us any examples of that? And then another one maybe of betrayal? Because I feel like the stories really explain family constellation work. They really bring it to life and help us see those patterns and connections.
So adoption, yes, you're right. Here is people, I have many clients who were adopted. And if it's within the family, that's actually can be a big, big blessing as well, because it's within the family. And the problem, I would say, starts when the person doesn't know that they are adopted. So this is, in constellations, what I love about constellations is that we are really working with the truth. There is no way but working with the truth. We need to acknowledge the truth. So if a person knows they are adopted, if they adopted children and they tell the children that the children are adopted, if the parents honor the biological parents of the child, then very often there is really not much issues. It can be a blessing. The family is like extended family. The child has instead of two parents, have four parents in a way. So the acknowledgement is the key. The problem starts being visible, in my opinion, that's what I've seen with my clients, when the children don't know that they are adopted. Because unconsciously, they know. Unconsciously, they feel something is off. They may not have words to it, but they know something does not feel right. So unconsciously, they will be always searching for something. It's like the longing, and this is the longing for biological parents. Yeah, the longing will be there. So when the longing is there, but we don't know what we are searching for, it can end up really in a very unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy way of beings. And that's what I've seen. I had parents coming to me telling me, oh, I have a son, he's 15 and he's acting up and he's coming even, he's taking a knife and trying to kill us. So really, really extreme. And basically, the only thing that the parents did, and of course they did it because they knew what to do, they sent him to a psychologist. But they didn't look at the bigger picture until someone told them maybe it's good to look at it from a constellation perspective. So this is how it can show up. So that inner longing, and even, we may be adults and we don't know we are adopted. So it's almost like there is always something missing. So it's very difficult to become fulfilled in life, to become contented in life, because we feel a part is missing.
One of the participants, Monika, I remember in a family constellation who had this adoption story in the family, history, was constantly seeking the parents in relationships.
Yeah.
The longing, the seeking was showing up as looking for the missing parent's love in relationships, right? So it can be displaced
Absolutely.
also, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be like intense loneliness and you can't understand why, because you're missing the connection with the biological parents, even though you have the adopted
And the adoptive
parents, right?
parents might have been really amazing. That's the point.
Yes.
Logic cannot explain it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about betrayal, Monica? Talk to me about when there has been a betrayal of some kind. I've seen this experiences in many constellations, like, when a great, great, great grandparent had another wife or a mistress, or when, one of the grandmother generations before was in love with somebody else, but then she had to marry somebody else. Like these kind of situations, which happened, they were quite common in previous generations, where they had to marry for status or wealth or, title, whatever it might be. What have you experienced or seen in these kinds of stories?
So this is in general, it's not just about betrayal. It really goes for every single topic that very often, if the situation, the event, the trauma, or the people who were involved, so let's say the grandmother and her first love that she couldn't get married to, the successors or the descendants like us, we may be entangled. That's the word we are using. So we may be connected to the story. We may be connected to those people. How does that show up? We repeat. We basically repeat that situation in our lives, and it can be in a different setting. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. But what does it mean we repeat it? So, for example, we may not be able to find the partner that we are looking for, with whom we have an equal, honoring, loving relationship. But we are experiencing the betrayal by our partners again and again and again. Or we don't want to commit because we are afraid that this will happen to us. Yeah. And sometimes we can be even entangled with the person who was betraying. So, we would call them, in a way, a perpetrator, right? And we may become those people. So it's like in every situation, it shows up differently. We may become the victims of betrayal, or we may actually become the ones who betray. And it can be in relationships, but, Sanaya, it can be also in business, that we attract partners that betray us in business, that take something from us. Because maybe this time our great grandfather or great grandmother was the one who betrayed, was not the victim, but was the one who did it to other people. So it's almost like we are trying to balance it out. Balancing is, in a way, also one of the orders of love that are running in our family system. So that's how it can show up.
As you were talking, it reminded me that my father, he was living in what is now Pakistan. Right? Before the partition. So India and Pakistan split to become two different countries. They were initially one big country. And around the time that my grandmother was pregnant with my dad, they had to move from one country or one land to the other because it split into two. And during that partition, my grandmother lost her husband, right? And in India, back in those days, a widow had no rights. So the minute you were widowed, all your family wealth, everything was taken over by the men in the family. Like they would administer, So what happened is my grandfather was very, very wealthy, incredibly wealthy. And they took what they could when they had to run from one land, which now is Pakistan, to India. Because my grandmother became a widow as soon as her husband was killed in that situation, the uncles took over the wealth, like everything they had, the jewels, the money. And my grandmother, who was a wealthy woman, became someone who had nothing. Okay. And they lived in a one-room apartment in what is now India. And it was my grandmother and all her children. And she had nothing of her own. And she basically lost everything. And there is this wound that my father carries, that he was betrayed by his uncle who took everything. And whenever he talks about that story, I can feel the pain, like they were left destitute. They were left with nothing because everything they had was taken by a family member. As my father grew up, he became, very independent. He started his own business. He became, someone who started from nothing and really grew his fortune, I could say. But he was always betrayed by his business partners.
Yeah.
He was even betrayed by a brother in business. So he repeated the betrayal story with friends, with brother. And I remember when I was in my 20s and I was going into my first business partnership, my father told me, don't do it. They will betray you.
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it. You will be betrayed. And sure enough, against my my better judgment, against all my will, I really did get betrayed in my first business, or I felt betrayed in my first business partnership. So even though that is not what I wanted, I told my father, no way, you're wrong. It's not going to be that way. This is different. But then I got betrayed. And then Maisha, my first cousin, who you know really well, became my second business partner with the Third Eye Center. And our first 1 or 2 years was really, really rocky, really difficult, because she was my cousin who I love. She's my cousin who I love. But all our family energy of betrayal,
of course,
was coming up, and I was always feeling like she was going to let me down or disappoint me or like betray me. Until I did a family constellation on this.
Exactly. So this is, see how deep it runs. We cognitively, we may be aware of it. So again, we knew it, right? You knew it. You had the story. So just knowing the story does not nullify it. It does not mean that, okay, I know what happened and I will be different. No, it needs a process of feeling it as well. There is the saying of what you can't feel, you can't heal. And it shows within us, really, as the heart, as an emotion, as a symptom, so that we look at it, we feel it for a little bit. It's not about dwelling in it, just feeling it, how it was for the grandfather, or the father, or the uncle even, grandmother, so that you don't stay loyal to those who were betrayed. It's basically staying loyal. And as children, we are always loyal to our family, to our parents.
I didn't see the connections until the family constellation. Like I knew these disconnected events, but I did not put all the dots together to recognize that my relationship with Maisha or my first business partnership. I mean, I knew parts of it. Like I knew, my father was betrayed by his business partner. Therefore, he doesn't want me to be in a business partnership. And sure enough, I got betrayed because of that belief. But I didn't understand it goes all the way back to his ancestors and what happened in those times. It took the family constellation process for me to connect the whole sequence of events and see how it tied together. So I have to say that the process itself is so powerful, and to uncover all these
and I think
connections.
this is exactly the difference that we already spoke about in the beginning. Just knowing and understanding is just not enough. So what we do in Constellation, why it is so different from a lot of approaches and modalities, is because it is experiential. So we feel it. We can experience it, and through the experience, this is where the shift happens.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
So, Monika, you are going to be in Manila again for the second time to do family constellation. And this time we're having 2 workshops because that first workshop we did was sold out and it was so full and people still wanted to join, but there was no space. So this time around, this August, we are holding your live workshop of family constellation again. The dates are August 20 and 21, which is a Thursday and a Friday. And the second one is right after that, August 22 and 23. So we have 2 live family constellation workshops with you, which I'm so excited about because I know I'm doing one of them. I don't know which one, but every time you come here, every time I get a chance to do family constellation, I always do it because I know there's going to be some kind of healing and it's going to make my life better in some way. And I don't always know how, but I always feel like that's the gift, is something is going to happen and something is going to open up in my life. So tell us a little bit, Monika, about what would happen, what can happen for people in a family constellation workshop, and why should they even want to join one? Can we talk just for a few minutes on that? Because I do want to make the experience available to as many people as possible. I know a lot of people are already signed up since May. So I don't know how many spaces are left, but regardless, I know you will always come back as long as we have more people to attend these workshops. But tell us a little bit.
So really, Constellation Workshop, in my opinion, is for everyone. You don't need to have problems in the family. You don't even need to have a specific topic to work on. First of all, you can also come as observer, right? So we have that possibility as well. You don't need to do your own constellation. You can actually come, be in that healing space, because it is healing space, and be representative, be the observer, and actually really experience within yourself what it does to you.
Monika, the observer, just for clarification, it means we as a workshop or as a group do not work on your specific issue.
That's right.
However, you participate to help us resolve other people's issues, which means you get healing as well.
Yes. So what observers were really sharing with me, and I've seen it a lot myself. I'm still going to family constellation workshops, and usually I'm the observer and representatives. Just by being in the space, seeing what's happening, what's transpiring in other constellations of other people, this gives us a lot of clarity. This can even do a shift within us, that suddenly we resolve our own issue that we don't want to talk about. But it is more about really becoming aware that we are part of something greater, that everybody who comes together as well, we are all children of our parents. We are all the same. The history of our parents, when we go back long enough, far enough, is very similar. Every single family has dealt with losses, with secrets, with grief, had a lot of challenges, but had a lot of joys, strengths. So through Constellation, we don't only look at the issues, but we can tap into the blessing and the strengths of our ancestors and to really get supported. So how does it work? It's an amazing process with strangers. You are going into a workshop and with different people who you don't know. Then we set up a constellation. So we are choosing representative for your family members, or for the abstract, like what I was saying in the beginning, for abstract things like money, for example, or success. It is literally something emerging in front of your eyes. It just shows up. Where is the energy coming from? What roughly happened? So even if you don't know your history, you will see that something happened in, let's say, second or the third generation. We may not always know. It's great if we know, of course, because we like to know, we like to understand it cognitively. But even if you don't know, the representatives will show. They feel it in their bodies through the process of acknowledgement, acceptance, really feeling it in the body that it's okay, that's what my ancestors or my parents went through, but this is not mine. And really being able to see it, feel it, experience it for a little while. So it may be a bit uncomfortable, right? Nobody says healing is comfortable. Then we can let go. Then we can move on. And this is when more clarity comes in, more inner peace comes in. And that's what we bring into our lives. This is what we what shifts we bring into our daily life, into our families. And what I love about Constellation is that it has a ripple effect. Ripple effect. It
Yeah.
spills like the trauma spills over, the blessings spill over too. So the greatest gifts that I've seen were with my kids, really. It's like when I got more at peace, when I understood what was going on in my family and I was able to acknowledge and let it go, this is when I could relax and my children could relax. So
So
yeah,
beautiful.
it's work for the whole family, for the system. That's why we call it family constellation, systemic
Yeah.
constellations. It affects the whole family in a good way. In a good way.
You're healing yourself and you're healing your family,
Yeah.
your children, and the ones who also came before you,
Yeah.
your grandparents and your ancestors. And I really second that because the first time you came to Manila, Monica, I don't know if you remember this, but my parents were visiting. They were in Manila because, the situation in
Yeah.
Dubai with the war and everything was pretty bad. So my parents were in town, they were visiting.
I
And
met them.
yes, you did.
Yeah.
And you did because you joined us for
Mhm.
dinner. But what I remember is I was a little bit torn because, my parents are visiting. And of course, the older I get, the more and more I want to spend every minute I get with my parents. And of course, they were visiting me. And I was like, oops, I want to spend time with my parents, but it's family constellation and I really want to be there for family constellation.
Mm.
And I spent the whole weekend with you,
Yeah.
3 days. I think it was Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday. I left half day on Sunday, I remember. But um, I ended up going for the family constellation, even though my parents were visiting. And it was so exciting. It was so powerful. It was incredible
Yeah.
to be a part of it. And I'm so glad that even though
Yeah.
I had to leave my parents, I was there for that family
Mhm.
constellation and I had my own
Mhm.
constellation with you. And we actually healed something that happened for my father,
Mhm.
right, in that constellation. And it was so interesting because after that constellation, I saw the shift in my own father.
Oh, wow.
I saw something shift in him. And I remember acknowledging to myself that in a way I did more for my family and my father by attending that family constellation than I would have if I had spent time
Yeah.
with him.
Wow.
So I really wanted to share that because that was something that was such a powerful realization for me that sometimes we do more
Mhm.
for the people we love by healing ourselves
Mhm.
and the patterns that we carry
Yeah.
than if we were to spend time with them or just be with them,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel torn between,
Yeah.
oh, but I have all these responsibilities and I have all these things I must do. But you can, in many ways, do more for the people you love when you heal
Yeah.
yourself and work on yourself. And, I really truly believe in that. Now, Monica, we are at the end of this very exciting conversation. I always say chatting with you is just so much of love, so much of healing, and so much of understanding that comes out of this. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
being on Project Loving Myself. As always, I like to share something that is close to your heart, Project Loving Myself mantra, something you believe in, something that helps you during difficult times. If you could offer something to our listeners today, anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, I feel that we all just need to come back to our heart. That's it. Seeing with
Yeah.
our heart, seeing from our heart. That's what we all need. And I thank you, Sanaya, as well, for doing this beautiful project and spreading the love and the self love. This is really one of the most incredible and needed things right now in the world because we see where we are. And when we just share a little bit more love with ourselves first and then with everybody who is there, then the world becomes a more beautiful, peaceful place for us all. Yeah. And
Wow.
I'm looking forward to
That
see
is
you very
our.
soon.
Me too. I can't wait. I can't wait, Monica. All
Wonderful.
right. How do people connect for the upcoming workshops? I'm going to drop some information. The Third Eye Wellness Center, my healing center here in Manila. How can people find you or connect with you otherwise, Monica?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Just under Monika Wyss, and also Heart Sanctuary Center. That's mostly for Malaysians, for people who are in Malaysia or visiting Malaysia. And yeah, that's it. Simple.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Monika.
much. And thank you everyone for listening, for watching.
Now, what I love about this conversation with Monika is the reminder of how so much of what is happening in our lives today, so much of what we carry, didn't begin in this moment. Sometimes the way we react, protect ourselves, shut down, overgive, people please, or feel not enough is connected to an old wound. Sometimes it's a younger part of us still carrying pain from childhood. Sometimes it's a family pattern we absorbed without realizing it. And sometimes it's a generational trauma passed down from the generations above us. Healing begins when we stop judging ourselves for our behaviors or those wounds and start asking where it came from. Because your triggers, your patterns, and the ways you protect yourself, they're not random. They come from old, unhealed stories. They often make sense when you understand the story underneath them. So if this episode stirred something in you, let it be an invitation to pause and ask, what wound might be asking for my attention? What pattern am I still carrying? And what would it look like to meet that part of me with compassion instead of criticism? Monika will be in Manila to do family constellation workshops. On August 20 to 21 is the first workshop, and the second one is August 22 to 23. So there are two options to choose from, a weekday or a weekend version. She'll also be starting to teach family constellation on September 14th. So if you're interested in becoming a practitioner of this modality, please get in touch. You will find a link in the episode description in the show notes with details on how to register or sign up for these workshops. Follow Project Loving Myself and connect with me on all social platforms at Sanaya Gurnamal, though I am most active on Instagram and YouTube. Thank you for joining me today for this very powerful episode on inner child work and family constellation. Until next time, my love, may you keep healing what was never your fault, but is now yours to love and to accept. You are loved.